I hope you can all hear me well. Thanks for joining this webinar on the topic of including youth in government decision making. My name is Natalia Little. I am a young person working in government. I'm a member of the Government of Canada's Open Government team, and my work is primarily focused on international affairs and collaborating with other countries. This webinar today is part of a larger series on the topic of inclusive open government that is being co-organized with the Open Government Partnership. Today you'll be learning about some interesting models that Canada is using to engage young people in important policy discussions. And you'll also be hearing from two youth advocates from the Open Government Partnerships Network who are actively engaged in efforts to enhance youth inclusion in their countries, which is Ghana and Kenya. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please feel free to use the chat box on the platform to post any questions as they come up. And myself and my co-organizer, Katrina from the OGP, will do our best to answer in real time. But there will also be time at the end of the webinar, after all of the presentations, to revisit some of your questions. Also, we'd be very interested to hear where you're joining from, so please let us know in the chat box. And please feel free to share interesting examples of youth involvement in government decision-making from your own country context. These are just a few examples that we're looking at today, but we're really interested in hearing what else is out there. Also, we invite you to share the discussion that we're having today online using the hashtag #InclusiveOpenGov, and we can also continue some of the conversations that we start after the webinar ends online using that hashtag as well. So before I introduce the speakers, I'm going to just provide a little bit of background information about why we're organizing this webinar series today. So for those of you who might be unfamiliar with the Open Government Partnership, it is the leading multilateral initiative for getting governments to put forward concrete commitments to advance transparency, accountability, and citizen participation. The OGP is a vast network. It includes 79 member countries as well as 20 subnational member governments. Recently, Canada had the privilege to assume a leadership position within the Open Government Partnership. From October 2018 to September 2019, Canada is serving as the government chair of the OGP Steering Committee alongside Nathaniel Heller from Results for Development. As co-chairs, Canada and Nathaniel Heller released a vision to advance the Open Government Partnership in 3 key priority areas. First, inclusion, which is about ensuring that open government efforts include traditionally marginalized and underrepresented communities. Second, which is participation. It's about making public engagement and citizen participation critical elements of government decision making. And then lastly, impact, which is about helping countries publish clear targets for open government and undertaking honest and transparent reporting on open government progress. As part of the inclusion priority, Canada committed to providing peer learning support to other OGP member countries on how to bring in underrepresented voices into open government work. So we're using this webinar series as one vehicle to deliver on this. Let's unpack the concept of inclusion a little bit further as well. Typically, conditions for meaningful participation in government decision-making are disproportionately available to people who have resources, education, or perhaps have a strong familiarity with government. As a result, citizens and stakeholders who are typically not well served by government processes face specific types of barriers for engagement and involvement, such as literacy, language, discrimination, personal context, etc. Poorly designed public engagement can also lead to further disenfranchisement of underserved communities. So the real challenge in the development of open government lies in truly incorporating the diversity of citizen voices into the apparatus of policy decision making, and it's about establishing very transparent and accountable methods for feedback. So ultimately, when we talk about inclusive open government, what we're talking about is building trust, it's about cooperation, and it's about equality. With that, I'm just going to provide some final framing for our discussion today. This is the overarching guiding question for our webinar series on the topic of inclusive open government. What are some potential strategies and actions associated with increasing the accessibility and inclusiveness of open government initiatives for underserved communities? Each community of interest has distinct needs and a distinct context, And for this webinar session, we're going to be exploring approaches for empowering youth to become more involved in the design of government services, programs, and policies. And so now I'd like to introduce our first set of speakers. We have Christopher Rayner, who is the Executive Director of the Government of Canada's Youth Secretariat at the Privy Council Office, as well as François-Olivier Picard, who is a former...
All right, greetings everybody from snowy Ottawa. I hope everybody can hear me all right from here. Super. Okay, well, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of the Prime Minister's Youth Council, and then I'll turn it over to François-Olivier, who can tell you from the trenches of what it's like to actually be a member of the council. And it really starts from the premise that actively involving young people in policy decision-making will make for better decisions. That good decisions involve a diversity of voices, and traditionally, young people have not been afforded those avenues and those ways of having their voices heard in the decision-making process. It's important because we also know that new generations have innovative ideas to very complex challenges that we face on a daily basis, that they sometimes frame issues a little bit differently, or that there are very different matters of importance that will be raised that we traditionally in government might not focus on in some ways. So it's not a new thing either that youth are engaged in their communities and the world around them. It's just sometimes we need to provide a better avenue for their voices to be included in the official decision-making processes from there. And when we look at the statistics of youth in Canada in particular, we know that this generation coming into the workforce now are particularly involved in volunteering, in business, in civic action, and student government as well. So it would really be to the detriment of our nation as a whole to not have their voices included in the decision-making process. So with that context in mind, the Prime Minister of Canada back in 2016 began or inaugurated the first Prime Minister's Youth Council here in Canada. It is really designed to be a platform to engage with the Prime Minister, with members of his cabinet, with members of Parliament, and senior government officials on a whole variety of issues. Now, how we choose the members of the council is a very complicated issue because over the course of, 3 years now, we've had over 20,000 youth lift up their hands and say, we want to be on this council. So we try to choose it in a very nonpartisan way where we're looking at geographic representation, demographic, cultural, life experiences. So we have a broad diversity of youth voices because the other factor is we all know that there is no one youth voice. There is such a diversity of experiences and perspectives that we also have to not fall into that trap where we say, okay, we've talked to a few youth, we know what youth perspectives are. So the selection process is managed by the civil service in what we hope is designed to be a very nonpartisan way, so that this diversity of viewpoints can be brought to the Prime Minister directly and, as we said, to members of his cabinet as well. Now, we've had an interesting year here in Canada, especially as we're looking to develop our first national youth policy ever for the country. And we've had a very long and broad engagement process that's been designed by youth for youth. And what that has meant is we've heard from thousands of youth across our country, and they've raised a couple of really key themes around environment, around mental well-being, education, skills, and employment. But one of the themes that really plays nicely into what we're talking about here, and a key one, is about youth voice in decision-making. How do we make sure that it's not just about the Prime Minister's Youth Council, but we have a variety of tools and mechanisms that youth voice can be brought into policy decision-making right across the Government of Canada. So it's been you can look on our website, we can share the link afterwards to the What We Heard report from that. And we'll be hearing soon from government decision-making about what they want this youth policy to be at the end of the day, to respond to what youth have been telling us over the course of this year in our engagement process. So maybe with that, I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, François-Olivier, and he can tell you a bit about his experience about being on the council.
Hi everyone, my name is François-Olivier. I'm a youth from Quebec City. Canada is a bilingual country, so English is not my first language, but I hope that you will be all able to hear me clearly. And yeah, I will talk about my experience in the Youth Council, which has been a life-changing experience over the last 2 years. I have colleagues who accompany the Minister of International Trade in Argentina, who accompanied the Prime Minister in Peru at the World Bank Summit. I went in Vancouver at the UN Summit to talk with other ambassadors. I have a friend who went to Poland also. So I think that Canada now wants to include more youth into the international scene, and I think it's a good thing that we, in our own way, represent in a non-partisan way Canada all over the world. So in that way, I think it has been a great success. Also, Chris talked about the diversity in the PMYC. For me, it has also been a life-changing experience. Why? Because I'm coming from a certain region in the province of Quebec, which is unilingual Francophone region, and we all kind of live in our own bubble. But to be able to talk with Inuits, with people from the east coast of Canada, from the west coast of Canada, from all different backgrounds, I think I very opened my own perspective, and I am no longer living in a social silo. And for that reason, the PMYC changed my life. And in a world which becomes more and more polarized, having that diversity of voice in a society, I think it's really, really, really important. My main goal in the PMYC has been to implement youth voice in the decision-making process. I think it's why I'm here today. I think the Prime Minister's Youth Council has been able to do a difference, and will do also a bigger difference in the future. I'm coming from Quebec, so Quebec, the province of Quebec has a youth policy, and what Quebec has done in 2016 has been to implement youth quotas on board of directors. So in the next years, it will be implemented in the law that each board of directors of Crown Corporation will be obligated to have a youth below 35 years old in their board, and it will be in a non-partisan way. So I think that Canada and Quebec starts to become leader in that way to implement youth into decision-making process. The youth movement also is very important in the society. I think youth are bringing change and are at the forefront of innovation. So to conclude, I think that all countries should have a Prime Minister's Youth Council. We are leaders, and I encourage you in your own country to spread the message. Thank you very much, and it will be a pleasure for me to answer your question.
That's great. Thank you both to Chris and François-Olivier for talking about the Prime Minister's Youth Council. We'd be very interested to hear if you have any questions about that specific model. Please let us know now, and we'll keep track and we can revisit later. But we will be moving on now to our next set of speakers. We have Emily Galeazzo, who is an analyst for the Government of Canada's Digital Youth Advisory Council, which is housed in Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. As well, we have Jose Jimenez, who is a member of that council, to speak about his experience as a member. So please take it away, Emily.
Hi there. Thank you, Natalia. This is Emily speaking. Very excited to be part of this conversation today. I hope you can all hear me well also. So I think that our slides should be coming up here in a moment. But I will continue on as they get loaded. So in July 2017, the Chief Information Officer of Canada, Alex Benet, launched the Digital Youth Advisory Committee. This group was made up initially of 16 youth between the ages of 16 and 20 with an interest in digital transformation and digital tools. The goal in creating the committee was to help integrate the youth perspective into initiatives within the Office of the Chief Information Officer at Treasury Board Secretariat. And these perspectives would then help future-proof policies and projects. However, quickly, the scope of the committee's work expanded to include consulting with departments across the federal government on a wide range of projects and policies. Some of the challenges that we encountered when the committee was being established was to explain the importance and relevance of the committee. People within government didn't all understand why we wanted to talk to youth outside of the government and what value would be brought. And this led to a bit of a challenge establishing internal partnerships. And there was a little bit of resistance from people who had less positive experiences with previous youth councils. Another challenge was the timeline. We certainly underestimated specifically legal and security implications. We had to navigate legal restrictions in interacting with youth who were unpaid and also particularly under the age of 18. The way that was resolved is our youth council, our youth committee, the members are volunteers, so there are limitations to the time that we can ask of them. We also decided to get secret clearance for the committee members, which was a bit of a challenge as they're not TBS employees. However, we were in the end able to get secret clearance for everybody, which is great because it means there are no barriers for them to consult on any policy or project up to secret level. We have had a little bit of challenge getting diverse representation. Obviously, we really want to have people from across the country as well as Anglophones and Francophones. Also, logistically, we have to have our meetings in the evening as youth and students are in class during the day, particularly those who are still in high school. However, so lessons learned from last year, we learned a lot about logistics, but we also learned a lot about the experience of committee members. One of the main takeaways was that members really wanted to do more and be more involved in planning. They also wanted to know what happened to the projects and policies after they were consulted, to see the impact of their contribution. So I'm happy to report that this year we haven't had the same problems with partnership also, and there's been really great support. Now I want to next turn it over to Jose to talk about his experience on the council. He is a returning member, so he was part of the original cohort as well as this year's.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Let me just see if I can get this working. Oh, there we go. Hello. Thank you, Emily, for that great introduction. I think on our side, some of the issues that we saw was we were used a lot in terms of consulting and providing advice, but we didn't actually get to see how that advice was implemented or even whatever happened with that advice. One of the things I would always encourage people, show youth how they're actually leaving an impact. If you're getting their help, show them how their help actually translates into tangible, solid actions. Because without that, at least for me, it was difficult to be fully engaged in the whole process itself. The work often felt incomplete, and we are really eager to see how things are implemented. Even more so, we're very eager to actually get our hands dirty and actually help in implementing those things. So furthermore, one of the other suggestions I'd like to add is get the youth involved in implementing those solutions. We're very eager people. I know someone mentioned earlier how youth now love to volunteer. They love to get their hands dirty. They love to get experience. It could not be more true right now. And with that, you can truly have the youth perspective involved in the actual development of your solutions. And some of the ways we actually got involved last year, I want to mention three of them. The first one was called Cracking the Code. We met with some of the HR teams at Treasury Board, and we consulted on improving recruitment strategies and the application process itself to attract more young people into government IT. The next one of this, we actually had a chance to speak with the Prime Minister's Youth Council on something that we used to call them the 5 digital principles for the workplace. They are now called something else, but they were basically principles that we stood by for improving the public service workplace atmosphere to make it more youth friendly and make it an exciting place for youth to want to be in. And with that, we had a chance to speak with the Prime Minister's Youth Council to not only to in a small way collaborate and see how we can improve these principles before we continue to move forward with them. What this also shows is a great desire for youth to actually collaborate and work together. There's always a little bit of competition, I find, amongst different youth groups, but ultimately we're all very eager to support each other, to want to work with each other, to want to work in teams and form partnerships. And I think that is something that has been missed in the past, something that even us ourselves, as we move forward, we need to take more leverage in. And finally, since we're talking about open government, we actually met with the open government team last year when they were developing their commitments for their chairmanship, I want to call it. And we actually consulted on how they could better engage youth in their consultation process and how to actually improve the actual engagement themselves to get not only make it more appealing for youth, but be able to get better advice, better feedback from youth themselves. And with all of this, I think there was this big undertone that we ourselves wanted to take lead of the council, of course, in cooperation and working with the TBS liaisons. And what we did after the end of last year and the start of the second year of the council, we got together and we made a vision for what we wanted to do. And the key theme here was we wanted to be self-driven. We wanted to take leads on our own projects. We wanted to be the ones forming those partnerships with people. And through that, you really develop a personal investment in the work that you're doing, which I think can make everything so much better. With that, we work with Emily, who's our coordinator, to leverage different tools available to us through the Government of Canada. So it's a very symbiotic relationship, right? We provide them with advice from the outside that they may not have had before, and we actually get to do some really cool work. And I think with that, it all comes together to help us towards our goal of expanding our impact, whether by providing advice, sharing information, or as we keep moving down, actually starting to work on our own project. With that, I'll pass it over back to you guys. I'll be more than happy to take your questions. And yeah, thank you for the time today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Emily and Jose, for providing an overview of the Digital Youth Advisory Council. And yes, please do ask your questions in the chat box and we can come to them later on. But we will be moving on to our next set of presenters. I would now like to introduce to you 2 youth leaders from the OGP network. We have first Eva Nizola from Kenya, a youth advocate championing sexual reproductive health and meaningful youth inclusion in governance. As well, we have Francis Emetepi, hopefully I said that right, a youth champion in the region of Africa strongly advocating for the power of social media to raise awareness, educate citizens, and hold leaders accountable. So we'll start first with Eva.
Hi guys, I hope everyone can hear me. Yes, that's good. Now, I'll just start by just saying this topic caught me by surprise, and just like involving youth in government. this topic was very interesting to me, because many a times we go for topics that kind of like focus on just getting problems, to listen to problems from the youth. But this is actually a solution-centered topic. And congrats to the one who came up with this. And I'll just think for us to be able to understand us, I'll just go back to what our hero Kofi Annan, what he said before, that we cannot solve problems without the experts without the expertise of the people who understand this problem best. And this goes directly reflecting to our young people. We cannot be solving problems for young people if young people are not involved in these discussions. And this is just to say, this was actually a very good platform for OGP, because they got to showcase that you're just not just vying or just championing for inclusion, and yet you do not include. So I am actually honored to have Francis Ametepe and myself on this webinar as well. So just as we said, for us to get more youth involved in government, let us just go back to the things that are more problematic to the youth, like what affects them in their different societies. And from this, you will get to understand, you will find the people who are really, really championing for the good of the youth, who are still in these same societies, fighting these same problems that are coming up in society day by day. So by just selecting a few who are really championing for the development of youth, or even just trying to better their societies in one way or another, it's a big way of bringing them in, mentoring them into governance, showing them the right way, because many people complain that the youth are not elected or maybe not given positions of power due to their irresponsibility and their recklessness in life. But we forget that there are those who are actually out there who are sincere in what they're doing, and they're actually just out for the good of their communities. So it is important for those who say they're in government, not that you're calling out the people in government, but it will be important for them not just to want the youth to come into government, but rather bring the government to the youth. Because the youth, as you said, we are ready to work. The youth are ready to work. And from where I stand, it is more of the mentorship. Yes, you've given the youth work and you expect them to deliver, but you cannot expect them to deliver to their full potential if they don't know how to. So it is important to actually mentor these people into these positions of leadership that they are given, so that if they do not deliver, we will say, okay, we did this and this and this, but it is wrong to call out people and yet you have not even tried to mentor them. And also, as Chris just said, in formulating the national youth policy, congratulations if you have successfully achieved that. But I would also go back in saying how, from where I come from Kenya, we're having people from formulating the national youth policy, but we're having people who are even retired, people who are still over, maybe they're youthful at heart, but not youthful as where the age bracket should stand at. And they're there making policies for young people. You wonder, how do you make policies for people who are not even involved? How do you even expect them to comply to these policies if they do not participate in formulating them? So it will be important for our government to bring in these young people, get them to participate in this policy making, and also just let them air out their options. And we don't want to have a youth who are just known by paper value. Like, yes, we had this group of people come in, they're young, and that's just for the media to take note of that. It would be important for us to be taken out of the paper value to, if there are ideas that have come up from the youth, it would be important for them to now start applying these things, because it's high time people stopped thinking that the youth are going to die before the older people, because it seems like in our societies today, the older people are given more opportunities in governance. It's like they are the ones who are going to outlive the younger people, and yet in real sense, the younger people are the ones who are coming up to. So if we want them to be custodians of our government, we need to hand them over these things as early as possible, to train them in governance, to bring them closer to the people who are doing well in governance, so that we don't have this same tale of the youth are failing, the youth are not responsible, the youth are not active. Yes, they're saying they're volunteering in these places, but you're not actually seeing them. It's because these older people are taking positions. We need to give them room to work, give them the resources that they need in terms of intellectual resources, to physical, to even financial resources, and let them work their way through this thing. And I'd be glad to just listen to other people as these ideas come in, because it's important that the OGP is actually now paying focus to youth, because we are people who have been in the menu for such a long time that we keep on hearing discussions about us, but without us. This is actually a good stand for how people are bringing us in close. So as an advocate from OGP, I am really, really delighted and would be happy to take in any questions from anyone. Yes, and I am glad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva, for sharing your perspective. That's wonderful. And we do have quite a bit of questions coming through. Thank you, everyone who's sharing their questions. We'll definitely get to them very shortly. Let's see if he has joined. I see him in the room. Francis, do you have your mic on?
Francis, can you check your microphone?
Okay, while we wait for Francis to sort out the microphone issues, I can go to one of the questions that we've received. But please, Francis, whenever your mic starts working, let us know, and we'll move on to you. So we had a question quite early on from Bello about the government of Quebec's youth quotas. He was asking, could François Olivier explain a little bit more about the youth quotas? Whom is each council member assigned to? Each Quebec department? So maybe François, Olivier, I'll get you to answer that question really quickly.
Hi, thanks for the question. Actually, there was a law that was voted unanimously in 2016 by the Parliament of the province of Quebec. It's the law 696, and it stipulates that each crowned corporations, like the entity that belongs to the states, like Hydro-Québec, Investment Québec, Caisse de dépôt et de placement du Québec, have to select one person in their board of directors who is less than 35 years old. So these board members are selected by in a non-partisan way. Actually, if you are from Quebec, you can apply online in a website that of a youth secretariat, like Chris Rayner, but from Quebec. I hope I'm clear. And what is awesome about that law is that each now you have that slogan, by youth for youth. So youth have a voice in the decision-making process. I think it's a great move forward, and we hope that then there will be a trickle-down effect to the bottom of the line.
Thanks. And also, Bello, we see that you also had a question on the structure of the Youth Council, the Prime Minister's Youth Council. And if you look at the chat box, you'll see that Chris, the Executive Director, he just shared a link with some more information. So you can just check that link and you'll see the structure there. We had also a question from Golem Kibria. May I know when the OGP will form a youth platform to sensitize youth agendas globally? So, as mentioned earlier, Canada is currently the government chair of the Open Government Partnership, and what we're doing, one thing we're doing is exploring how we can get youth more involved in formal, oh, hello?
Yes, I think now I'm good to go. Can you hear me?
Wonderful.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Katrina. I'm much happy and excited to be on board to represent the mass voices, which is the youth across Africa and beyond, and of course within the OGP working framework. To me, it is very important to put young people first. And this means that youth are not just being part of ordinary consultative process, but rather involved from the onset of every development agenda in ensuring that 2030 agenda principle, which says leave no one behind, is actually being fulfilled. Speaking on the topic, which is youth involvement in government decision making, to me, we first of all must acknowledge the fact that youth involvement goes beyond ordinary youth participation. And that is what many a time we experience. So young people are being used or being invited to participate in many conferences and summits. But after participating, we actually not being involved in most of the things that really concern young people. And a practical example is what I'm going to share with you. For instance, during the post-2015 action campaign, during the post-2015 action campaign, in 2014, young people like myself was involved in the consultation process. And because I was involved in the consultation process, up to now, I am still involved in the SDG engagement and making sure that the agenda is eventually being achieved, either from now until 2030. So my key point here is that most the speakers have already made mention of the challenges young people faces, coming from the age bracket, coming from you not getting enough capacity to actually articulate the kind of ideas they have. These are all basic challenges, but my point is youth involvement goes beyond ordinary participation, and that is what we keep experiencing. So we at Youth Advocate Ghana, for instance, we believe that youth participation is just one part of the journey. So involving them also counts. So we create space using our African Youth SDG Summit, for instance, where young people across Africa and beyond come together. We learn, we connect, we share best practices, and then when we go back, we still have measures in place to ensure that at the local level, at the community level, these young people actually do things that will make impact to ensure that the SDGs is being achieved by 2030 while supporting their own self within that regard. Let's look at the policy gap, for instance. In my country, for instance, Ghana, we have what we call the National Youth Policy, which is currently under review. The whole mandate of it, for which it was set up in 2003, was basically to actually be a center for young people and youth-related issues. But it will surprise you that when you get to this National Youth Authority Center, the people there are not young people. It's becoming too much for young people to keep saying, no, these people are more, they are no more young people. But it will surprise you. The reality to the issue is that when you go to these offices, which are youth-focused and youth centers, the people managing these centers are not young people. They are not youth. They are beyond the ladder of the age bracket of young people. And that is one critical thing that we have already looked at. And then lack of, I wouldn't say lack, I would say inadequate capacity for young people to actually exhibit what they have been doing. I think the truth of the matter is young people are eager. For instance, myself, when I was introduced into the SDG from 2012 and up to now, I'm still in the process. That means young people are eager to do it when they are being involved. But on the second note is that their capacity needs to be built by the grown-up people. So we have the ideas to actually do something at the community level. But putting these ideas, how to articulate our ideas, our ideas into maybe concept notes is where the challenge comes in. And it is very delicate. It cuts across. When we finished our African Youth SDG Summit and we were receiving documents or proposal or concept notes from young people to be supported, we realized that over almost 50 applications we've received, the concept note is not concrete enough. It is not solid enough. It's not convincing. It looks like it's a storytelling concept, but we feel that this is where we as young people also lack, and we need to be engaged in the process for a long period of time before young people can actually take charge and then rule. So OGP, for instance, we are really proud to be on board and to come on board as well, because now OGP is using young people in most of their things because they believe in the power of young people. And let's not forget that the Sustainable Development Goals, almost 65% of the target of the 169 target reference young people. And this is a key reflection and a key reason why, leaders and world leaders really understand that young people are really important in every developmental sector we find ourselves. So development is young people, and that is why mostly emphasis are being given to young people. My conclusion or my key points to crown it all is to say that we have been experiencing youth participation, and that is not supporting the development agenda for which we are all craving for. Going forward, young people should be involved from the onset of the policy to the implementation to the evaluation of every single agenda. I will end here. I know my colleagues Eva have said it all. And if for any reason questions will come up, I'll be in the position to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Francis, for sharing your perspective. It's really interesting to hear about Ghana's national youth policy. And I think we can go back to some of the questions now. And this kind of dovetails very nicely, because one of the questions that we have is about creating a formal youth platform within the Open Government Partnership. This was a question from Golem. And Golem, actually, Eva and Francis, they were both participants in a youth workshop that took place in Georgia. So the government of Georgia hosted the last OGP Global Summit in the summer of 2018, and it was the first time that a youth workshop was organized, and youth leaders from across OGP countries were selected to come and share ideas for developing principles to guide greater involvement of youth in open government reforms. And we're actually going to be hosting a similar workshop, building upon that good work that took place at that first youth workshop. Canada's hosting the next OGP Global Summit in May 2019, and we will be having, again, another youth workshop, and we're going to really develop concrete tools, resources that can help strengthen the youth network and help strengthen youth involvement in the OGP. Another thing we're going to be doing is piloting youth involvement in formal OGP governance structures. So there's the main OGP governing body, it's called the OGP Steering Committee, and there's several subcommittees. And traditionally, there has been no youth presence in these governance bodies. And we think that this is a great opportunity for us to test out to see how youth can contribute to those governance bodies and making important decisions within the OGP. So we're exploring right now how we can do a pilot, and we'd be very interested to hear any ideas from the community and everyone that's in the chat. And again, if there's any other ideas that we haven't explored that you think that Canada could explore as the government chair to build a stronger youth platform within the OGP, I'd be very keen to hear those ideas. So you can also reach out to me. We have a question that I'm going to open up to all presenters to answer. The question comes from Darin. It is about how we can effectively engage youth from different backgrounds. So not the usual suspects, which is perhaps political junkies, youth from very top-end schools, privileged backgrounds that can engage easily with government processes. But what are different types of creative techniques that you think could be used to reach those more disenfranchised youth? Youth with disabilities, minorities, low and middle class. So do we have any interesting ideas?
Hi, it's Chris Trainer here. I'd love to jump on that one if I could right away. So when we were doing our consultations on the development of the first youth policy for Canada, one of the things we found really worked well is if we are not the ones trying to come up with all those techniques from the government. One of the fundamental principles was by youth for youth. So we had sessions, and this was a traditionally uncomfortable thing for people in government to do, but we had to give up control. We said any youth out there in Canada who wants to bring a group together, have a conversation about the topics, the things that they want to see happen to help support youth, we encourage people to have those conversations, and they could either invite a member of the government to come and participate with them, or simply give us feedback from the discussions that they had. And we found that that one approach really opened the door to youth that we never would have been able to reach into traditionally from the Government of Canada. So there were sessions right across the country. There were youth that had sessions with their community groups, with their group of LGBTQ communities, with just such a variety of people. And what we heard back was that they felt a lot safer in those conversations too, because it was about their own peer groups, their own communities, and there was a lot more of an openness to be able to share some of the frank conversations, to be able to feed back into the decision-making process from there. And just another little tidbit too was sometimes we also found the location was a key one too, where when we were organizing sessions from the Government of Canada's perspective, we would choose university settings and things like that. But we heard early on in the conversation that choice of location excluded other youth who did not feel comfortable, for example, coming onto a university campus, because that just wasn't part of their experience and their life approaches there. So we had to be very careful in the selection of the where, but again, just releasing the control and letting youth choose who, with whom, and how they wanted to have these consultations was a key part for us.
Is there anybody else that'd like to tackle that question? I'd be interested to hear if our friend Eva Francis from the region of Africa might have some examples of interesting creative techniques.
Yeah, I would love to tackle that as well, because what Katrina has said is quite on point, because you will realize that for these other groups that are not well represented in very many places, we will realize that some are not comfortable, or maybe they don't even know. So what I had said before, if we can realize these strong people or young people in society who are working for the benefit of their people, and have them go to these other people in their grassroots communities to talk to them, you'd actually realize that many young people are out there, but they don't just feel comfortable in talking to people who are older than them. But when you expose people to their peers, and they're actually seeing people, their peers in leadership positions, who are coming back to them to talk to them, guide them in matters concerning governance or even civic education, you'll realize that the young people, even from lowly represented brackets in society, will come out and they will forge forward in just fighting for what they believe, and also the good of their community as well. So yeah, I would also suggest that would be very, very important.
Okay, great. I think unless there's anybody else that wants to take on that question, maybe we'll go to another question. So we have a question actually from Allison. So thoughts on getting young women involved in open government. So what has worked in this community engaged in co-creation and youth agenda development? So are there any lessons learned from getting youth more involved in government that could be applicable for perhaps getting women more involved too? Mm-hmm. And I see Devin's thanking everyone for their answers to her questions. That's good. Do we have? I'm wondering if Emily or Jose are there. If there's any questions that are resonating with you. We have some other questions about.
Hi, Natalia. I was just going to jump in on that question that you had just highlighted, getting young women involved and youth involved. Something that has come up in conversations, I certainly don't think I have a solution, but something that we've observed, feedback from, in fact, one of the young women on the Digital Youth Advisory Committee was that for people who are outside of government, for young women who haven't worked in government before, just the way that we recruit people and the way that we ask people to apply to different government positions is not very conducive to getting young people on board. Like in Canada, the Federal Youth or Federal Work Experience Program is something that a lot of youth, that's kind of their gateway to their first government job. It's very, it's not very clear, it's not very easy for young people to use this portal to get in. And, you know, like the status of their application is not very clear. So I think that something that we need to do is work on breaking down those barriers to kind of streamline getting these people into government. And I know that there's been work on that even within the groups that we work within Treasury Board Secretariat of Canada, working on streamlining that application process and getting young women in particular into computer sciences and different IT roles. So I think that is really what we need to focus on, is removing barriers.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks for taking that on, Emily. Okay, so we have another pretty general question. It's from Moritz Ader. And the question is, what is the role in the rich universe of existing youth organizations and associations with becoming involved in open government processes? So we could turn also to Eva and Francis. I don't know if you have examples of leading youth advocacy groups getting involved in the open government processes on the ground in your countries. We know here in Canada that from our perspective, we've been trying to develop stronger relationships with youth organizations, youth advocacy, nonprofits, and we're working on that. One way we're doing that right now is with our global youth, or our global summit that's happening in May. We're trying to look at different opportunities to work with local organizations that are advocating for youth and how they can have a role in our summit programming and how they can get connected with our broader open government community. But I'd be very curious to hear about who are the big players in terms of youth organizations that are out there in the open government arena that we can maybe do a better job of harnessing their power and harnessing their.
All right, so speaking from Ghanaian point of view, when we talk of National Youth Council or how we can collaborate with civil societies in Ghana to actually work within the OGP processes, I think Ghana, we are quite good with that. So we have the National CSO platform. That is a platform that almost all the civil society organizations within the countries have representatives on the board. So the difference might perhaps be the country OGP not collaborating with this already set up civil society to actually work on OGP processes. So in my country, I think that the setup is there, but maybe they just need to be connected to each other so that the OGP Ghana network or chapter can directly or indirectly involve the mother organization of all civil societies in the countries to actually work on open government initiative in the country. Thank you. My submission from Ghana.
Thank you, Natalia. What I can say is that from Kenya, OGP is still a very new entity to Kenya, because much as Kenya joined OGP years back, it has been on the down low. Like not many people were well acquainted to OGP as an entity. Not until the start of this year when we formulated our National Youth Action Plan 3 in partnership with OGP. What I'd say is that we have, just like Francis, we have many people who are from different organizations who have come together to form one civil group that is connected to OGP, but we do not have any youth group or any youth organization that is partnered to OGP in any way, because in Kenyan's defense, OGP is still very new to so many people, and I think it would be good also to have youth organizations partnered with OGP. Yeah, my take from Kenya.
Yeah, to jump on that, if you want youth involved, I think that they have to feel that their voice matters and they are listened to. For example, if you take the university leaders or other youth groups across Canada, they can go to parliamentary commissions or call the ministers, and if the ministers or the members of the parliaments or the members of the government take their advice into considerations, I think that it will encourage youth to get more and more involved, because they feel they make a difference. And that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm. And just one final thought on that too. I think that there's a lot of work that could be done to take stock of the wonderful global youth organizations that are out there that we could leverage within the open government sphere. There's a lot of beautiful connections, and there's a lot of work that's happening that we don't necessarily need to duplicate, but we can amplify. So I know for our part, as part of Canada's co-chairmanship vision of inclusion, participation, and impact, this is definitely an area we're looking at. So trying to get a better sense of the landscape, and we're really hoping that the OGP Global Summit is a moment to bring some of those actors into the open government community. I think we're like at time right now. We're ending perfectly. It's just before 11 o'clock. I just wanted to say before we close, thank you so much to all of the presenters that contributed to this webinar session, and for everyone for being so active in the chat. Your questions have been wonderful. We're going to be publishing this webinar, so the OGP has a YouTube channel. This recording will be published at a later date, and we will share the link on Twitter. Both the OGP will share it, and the Government of Canada's Open Government account will share it, OpenGovCan, so you can find it there. And our next webinar will be on the topic of applying a feminist lens to open government efforts, and it will be taking place on March 13th. So keep your eye out for that registration link when it is shared. And again, thank you to Katrina Galang, my co-organizer from the OGP, for helping with this session. So please feel free to reach out to me, Natalia Little from the Government of Canada's Open Government team, if you have any questions about this. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good.